How's it going, guys? Restaurant18 here. Earlier today, the SGM forums got the patch notes for version 3.1. In today's video, I will be talking about the fighter changes, more specifically the SA changes that occurred in this update. We will be starting with Dragon Brawler Beowulf. Dragon Brawler's current SA1 is that while he is in hype mode, you gain a 15, 25, or 35% bonus to crit rate, and a 50, 60, or 75% bonus to crit damage. His new SA1 is that he gains 3, 4, or 5 stacks of precision when activating hype mode, and gains 100% increased crit damage while in hype mode. Overall, I like this change for Dragon Brawler. It gives guaranteed crits to a crit-based variant, and also gives him more crit damage as well. The precision is nice for ignoring defensive SAs as well. Next is Baseline Big Band. His old SA1 is that on tagging he would gain heavy regen for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. His new SA1 is that on tagging he gains heavy regen and armor for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. Overall, I think this buff is actually... I'll just say this buff makes him slightly more annoying to deal with, but if you have a buff remover, you should actually just get rid of those, and then he'll just melt away. He'll like that. Next is Cerebella, Armed Forces Cerebella. Her old SA1 was that getting hit has a 5% chance to grant armor for 5, 10, or 15 seconds. Her new SA1 is that she gains the armor for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. Her old SA2 also had her gain unflinching for 5, 10, or 15 seconds, and her new SA2 has her gain the unflinching for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. Overall, this nerf is actually not a bad nerf at all. Armed Forces can still be annoying to deal with, even though her buffs don't last as long. Up next is Nonsense Double. Her old SA1 stated that when at an elemental advantage, she would gain 2 random buffs for 10, 12, or 15 seconds anytime the opponent gained a buff. Her new SA1 is that when she is at an elemental advantage, she would gain 1, 2, or 3 random buffs for 10 seconds anytime the opponent gained a buff. Her old SA2 was that when she was at an elemental advantage, she would inflict 2 random debuffs for 10, 12, or 15 seconds after suffering a debuff. Her new SA2 is that when she's at an elemental advantage, she inflicts 1, 2, or 3 random debuffs for 10 seconds after suffering any debuff. Overall, Nonsense still is just the same old nonsense. It's just that it's more buffs and debuffs involved, well, for slightly less time. Up next is Mismatch Double. Her old SA1 is when she is transmuting to the opponent's same element, she copies 1, 2, or 3 of the opposing buffs. Her new SA1 is while sharing the opponent's same element, gain a 50, 75, or 100% chance to copy all of the opponent's buffs anytime the opponent gains a buff. While this is slightly better and more convenient than her old SA1, Mismatch still loses out on having the type advantage, and she doesn't actually get to seal the buffs. She just copies them. Overall, still a lackluster double, and a lackluster silver. Up next is what is currently the weakest natural diamond in the game, Out Eliza. Her old SA1 is that 25, 35, or 50% of all damage inflicted is regained as health, as long as Eliza's health percentage is lower than her opponent's. Her new SA1 is that 50, 60 or 75% of all damage inflicted is regained as health as long as Eliza's health percentage is lower than her opponent's, and this also counts for blocked hits as well. Sadly, Standout did not get what she needed. While she does regain health faster, and she can eke out a bit of health on block, this change does not solve the fundamental problem with her SA, which is that she can't just heal to full with her SA. Up next is Bad Miss Frosty Filia. Her old SA1 had a 50% chance on critical hits to disable the opponent's tag-ins and special moves for 4, 5, or 6 seconds. Her new SA1 has a 50% chance on critical hit to disable opponent's blockbusters for 4, 5, or 6 seconds. Her old SA2 disabled opponent's super meter for 4, 5, or 6 seconds. Her new SA2 inflicts armor break for 4, 5, or 6 seconds when she disables the opponent's blockbusters. Overall, Bad Miss Frosty has become a bit conflicted in her role. While before she was purely a control-based variant with disabled tag-ins, special moves, and blockbusters, she now only disables blockbusters and then grants armor break. The armor break can be nice for fighting against things like Resident Evil and the Silver PF. However, Bad Miss Frosty's attack stat is low, and Filias in general rely on bleed for damage, which ignore armor anyway. And as such, the armor break feels more like a nerf compared to her full control game that she had before. Next is Idle Threat Filia. Her old SA1 was that evading an attack would grant final stand for 3, 4, or 5 seconds. Her new SA1 is that evading an attack grants final stand and armor for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. Her old SA2 was that 100, 150, or 200% of the damage inflicted against dashing opponents is regained as health. Her new SA2 is that she inflicts armor break for 5 seconds when hitting a dashing opponent, and then 100, 150, or 200% of the damage dealt from that attack is regained as health. Overall, Idle Threat has gotten a nice little buff. Her evade buffs last longer, she gets armor alongside the final stand, and she now gets a actual benefit to hitting the dashing opponent, other than just regaining health. Ultimately, though, Idle Threat is still a below average Filia, but she is definitely more viable than she once was. Next is Grimfan Painwheel. Her old SA1 is that once per match, she gains unflinching and immunity for 20 seconds when dropping below 20, 30, or 40% health. Her new SA1 is that once per match, she gains unflinching and immunity for 15 seconds when dropping below 25, 35, or 50% health. Overall, Grimfan's buff is nice. Shortening the unflinching and dropping the threshold required to activate that unflinching means that she will be much more likely to actually get her revival SA2 off. Overall, a nice buff for the defensive side. Up next is Raw Nerf Painwheel. Her old SA1 granted her permanent enraged when her health dropped below 15, 20, or 25%. Her new SA1 and has her gain permanent enrage and haste when her health drops below 25, 35, or 50%. Her old SA2 gave her permanent haste when health fell below 20, 35, or 50%. Her new SA2 inflicts permanent death mark on the opponent when your health drops below 15, 20, or 25%. Overall, while Raw Nerf has been buffed, she still has the fundamental problem of having to lose quite a bit of her health to get the full benefit of her SA. Next up is Primed Parasol, a personal main of mine. Her old SA2 was that on tier detonation, she inflicted bleed on the opponent for 3, 4, or 5 seconds per active tier. Her new SA2 is that detonated tiers inflict bleed for 3, 4, or 5 seconds on hit. This is a nerf. However, this is probably the most inconsequential nerf on the entire list. This is because out of all of the things in Prime's kit, her SA2 was the least used thing in her kit. Next up is Sketchy Peacock. Her old SA1 was that all teammates tag in with haste and immunity for 10, 12, or 15 seconds. Her new SA1, is that while Peacock is alive, she gets the effects of the teammates tagging in with haste and immunity. And then her SA2, with opponents tagging in with slow and curse for 10, 12, or 15 seconds, has had that same aim clause applied to it of while Peacock is alive. It's a nerf. I can't really say much about that nerf. You kind of want to keep Sketchy hidden away in the back anyway, if you're using her for the curse. So yeah, that's a thing. Up next is That's All Folks Peacock, one of the first golds I ever invested into on my account, and also one of my favorite Peacock palettes. Her old SA1 says that getting hit has a 15% chance to grant Enrage and Armor Break for 5, 7, or 10 seconds. Her new SA1 says that getting hit has a 15% chance to inflict Armor Break for 10 seconds and grant 3, 4, or 5 stacks of precision. Overall, That's All Folks has gotten worse. On the offensive side, That's All Folks suffers from the same problem that she had suffered from before, which is that she has to get hit in order to activate her SA1, which is terrible for offensive viability. On the defensive side, That's All Folks, the precision stacks that she will be getting are overall much worse for her than the enrages that she was getting. And because the precision stacks don't help her against a player playing perfectly against her and not opening themselves up and letting themselves get hit. Next is Scared Stiff Squiggly. Her old SA2 said that she cannot suffer more than 20, 15, or 10% health from a single hit. Her new SA2 says that she cannot suffer more than 15, 10, or 5% health from a single hit. This is a huge buff for Scared Stiff. She could actually be worth taking to gold as a defender, and as a budget defender, or at that. The best counters to her will be bleed characters, since they can reliably damage her through her SA. Finally, we have Graveyard Shift Valentine. Her old SA1 had her gain 2 stacks of regen for 15, 17, or 20 seconds, and immunity for 10 seconds after defeating an opponent. Her new SA1 is that Valentine and all teammates gain heavy regen for 10, 12, or 15 seconds and when any fighter is defeated. Her old SA2 was that when any teammate is defeated, all remaining teammates gain regen for 7, 10, or 15 seconds. Her new SA2 is a 15% chance on hit to inflict curse and heal block for 5, 7, or 10 seconds when benefiting from regen. Now, Graveyard Shift's SA is a lot better than it used to be. However, her attack stat is absolutely pathetic, and as such she is just unviable to use as a real sort of cursor or heal blocker her in high streak play. Great for the silver PF though. Those were my thoughts on the fighter SA changes for version 3.1. I hope you all enjoyed.